Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Crystal, and today I'm explaining solo stands. Now, what is a solo stan? A solo stan is essentially a person who only likes one member from a K-pop group. Now, this definition varies, and how people view solo stans varies depending on the K-pop fandom. I'm specifically going to talk about solo stans in the BTS ARMY fandom. However, in other fandoms, I am very aware that solo stans are viewed differently. For example, in the NCT fandom, there are a lot of people who are solo stans because there are so many members in the group, or they only stan one specific group from NCT. Now that that's out of the way, let's talk about BTS solo stans. Now, BTS solo stans are rejected within the fandom space, and you may be thinking, oh, why is that? Isn't it like a good thing that there's individual, like quote unquote, individual fandoms for each of the members? Well, it's actually not, because ARMY is a fandom. We are a fandom that champions being a collective and working together to do things, and we do not believe separating by members. Now, in some fandoms, there are divisions within the fandom depending on things like ship, interest, character they like, celebrity like, etc., etc. For example, within the One Direction fandom, there is a split between people who like individual members, but then within the ship context, there's a split between people who like different ships, and then there's ships like Larry, between Liam and Harry from One Direction. And that ship separates strongly from the other ships within the fandom. That's just some context to help in understanding. BTS ARMY as a fandom and as a collective, we don't believe in separating the fandom in any type of way. We believe that if we make decisions as a fandom, we should do them together. That's why, for instance, in April 2021, when there was issues with academics in the space, many people started to disidentify them as ARMY because they started to make decisions away from the collective group. So even though someone might self-identify as an ARMY, from other ARMYs, they may be disidentified as an ARMY because of their behaviors that go against the collective. Now that we understand that, let's talk about solo stans. Solo stans fundamentally are not recognized within the fandom, and they are not even recognized by BTS. And because BTS themselves do not recognize solo stans, the fandom does not recognize solo stans. Many behaviors and ideas directly from BTS are circulated and reinforced by fans. And even if BTS do not explicitly say something, that is still adopted and reinforced by fans. For example, during the monk situation where RM visited a Buddhist temple, it was supposed to be a private visit. But one of the monks went to the media and talked about RM's visit and gave information to his response to a question about military enlistment. In response to that article being released, RM posted a Instagram story saying that next time he'll just go quietly. And to fans, this is an indirect response to the article. And through this, we reinforce behaviors of respecting his space and not consuming articles that talk about private information from the members. And that is just one example of the way the fandom reinforces certain behaviors through implied things that the BTS members do. Now, BTS have always reinforced that ARMY as a fandom likes all 7 members. Taehyung has said, please love all 7 of us before. When BTS talk at concerts, they only ever say ARMY or our fans. And they never use any of the solo stan names that solo stans may give themselves, because solo stans are not accepted by BTS and they are not accepted by ARMY. To kind of explain this, let me draw this diagram. So right here in this black rectangle, we see this is the fandom space, okay? This is where all the groups of people who might be somehow connected to BTS ARMY exist. Now here's this really big circle. This represents fans who like all 7 members. Some of them might stream, some of them might do fan art, some of them might do fanfiction, some of them might do voting, funding. There are a variety of activities that ARMYs can do. And this is where they are in the fandom space. Now, in addition to ARMYs, there's also the solo stan groups. They are in the fandom space, but they are not ARMY. And we don't recognize them as a part of the fandom, because the fandom is ARMY. They're in the fandom space. It's like if you were having a wedding and then someone crashed your wedding. You have the wedding with all your family and the people you invited, and then there are people who are in the wedding space but are not a part of the wedding. And within the fandom space, there's also different groups of people. There's some malicious groups like trolls. There might be people running bot accounts. There might be people who are haters. There might be people who are coming in to be toxic. And there might be people coming in to scam. Now, all these people exist within the fandom space, but they are not a part of the fandom. In addition to malicious people being there can also be people there that are there for altruistic reasons. For example, researchers and academics. There might be journalists, but then ARMY as a fandom does have some issues with certain journalists. There might be people who are trying to learn about the fandom in any type of way, whether that be a commentator or an academic or some type of person involved in fandom meta. So those are typically all the groups that you would see within a fandom. Of course, the fandom ARMY itself is divided into subgroups depending on interest and what you're involved in the fandom. And that goes for all these other groups. But that gets a little complicated, so we're gonna keep it symbol like this. So this is the fandom space, and these are all the groups of people in it. However, not everyone in this space is a part of the fandom, or even is a part of a fandom. This goes back to April 2021 and the issues that happened with academics. There might be armies who reject them as being a part of the fandom. Now, there are a lot of things with like dual identities and people being disidentified or disowned by the fandom or blacklisted by the fandom, and some people from these other groups who might consider themselves armies, but then they are identified as a whole by the fandom as these other groups. It's not that complicated, but there is nuance. And that's what I want you to consider throughout this whole entire conversation with solo stands. There is nuance. Armies as collective, we do not accept solo stands. We thoroughly reject them because they are not recognized by BTS and they also harm our space. Now, this is where a lot of the nuance comes in with the conversation. There are solo fan bases that help with voting, that help with funding, and do productive things. They might fundraise money and support charities in the name of BTS members. However, there are also many bad sides to them. Many solo stands have a construed view of the company and of BTS themselves, and they use that construed view to justify their actions. For example, many Jungkook solo stands were trying to boycott Stay Alive when it first came out in order to kind of stick it to the company, because for solo stands, this goes for all of them, they all believe that in some way, the company or the group BTS are holding down the members, and that their favorite member is the only one that they need to support. That is what they truly believe. And they believe these false narratives around the company and around BTS. They believe the BTS members might be bullying this one member. They believe that the company is suppressing this one member. For example, for Jin and Taehyung, who have expressed that they want to do acting before, many of these solo stands hyper-focus on that aspect of them. They're like, oh, since they have not done any acting, thus the company must be suppressing them from acting. When both Jin and Taehyung have expressed that they are okay with that and that they want to focus on music. Jin himself has expressed that even though he wanted to act before, right now he is focused on his music. And currently, right now, in this moment, he is enlisted within the South Korean military. But solo stands will hyper-focus in on these previous things the members have said instead of what they are currently saying in order to justify that the company is somehow suppressing them or the other BTS members are holding them down. This type of thinking justifies a hero complex within the solo stands, who are essentially trying to quote-unquote save the member from the company and from BTS. And many of these groups also get aggressive with armies and say that armies are not doing anything for a member or for the releases, or they try to justify dogpiling or harassing someone because they are a quote-unquote hater of their favorite member. And to add more nuance into the conversation, there are solo stan fan bases from other countries outside of America that do help members of the fandom in some type of way. For example, Solo Stan China Bars, which are groups of Chinese fans from China who organize together, they end up being one of the biggest buyers of albums. And because of shipping issues, many of these Chinese bars end up being the people who buy albums and distribute them to people within the fandom. But like in all aspects of a fandom, there is nuance to these Chinese bars. Even though they buy a lot of albums, they also have the capability of boycotting albums. And the justification for that, because the member is somehow being harmed by a company that they themselves choose to be at, or harmed by the BTS members. And take into account as well that all the BTS members have stock in the company and have renegotiated contracts from 2019 where they had much more leverage to rewrite their contracts to be in the benefit of them. In addition to that, they also had their contracts looked at by an outside lawyer source and not by Big Hit themselves only. By the way, this is 2019 before Big Hit became hype and all that jazz. So BTS themselves are very capable as musicians and as independent people to make their own decisions. They have autonomy. They are not controlled by some dark evil company. That is from the dark side of K-pop narrative, which stems from K-pop companies like YG Entertainment, JYP Entertainment, and SM Entertainment, who have blacklisted and harmed idols in the past. But we're not going to get into all that history right now. So as a whole, solo stans are not people we accept, they're not people that we want to invite into the fandom, and they're not people we support within the fandom. But there is nuance to this type of conversation. Yes, solo stans do help with funding. Yes, they help with streaming. But I would not accept their help or their support, because the baggage that comes with them is extreme. They are not helping the community, they are harming it. And since BTS themselves do not accept solo stans, have never acknowledged their existence, and has never ever expressed wanting their own fans for them as an individual member instead of them as a group. ARMYs, as fans of BTS, that is what we reinforce and that is what we listen to. We're not going to accept some outgroup just because they want to keep inserting themselves into our conversations. They are not a part of our fandom. They are within the fandom space. They are an outgroup. They are not someone we want in our fandom. Because we do not want to give power to people who feel like they can boycott and they can directly harm BTS themselves because they are not getting what they want for their own selfish reasons. And those reasons are based on misconstrued details and lies. And that's me explaining solo stands. Thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, please remember to stay thoughtful